Tony slowly walked towards the SWAT house.
Hello? Anyone here?
But as he stared out into the parking lot, he noticed an old lady dressed in white walking towards him, eyes fixed and staring at him. As Tony stood up to ask the old lady, she disappeared.
Oh boy, Merca, do we got a video for you.
Yes.
Especially those of you living in small towns. Your town might be on this list. We're talking about evil small towns that are haunted.
Pure evil.
Yeah, pure evil, full with demons and ghosts.
You guys, you want to stick around.
Dog boys.
For this one.
It's gonna be fun.
Yeah.
All right.
Starting off our list today, we have the small town of Fairfax, Virginia, with a population of 24,000 people and one bunny man. No, I'm not talking about some strange, unethical scientific experiment that broke the laws of both nature and the law and created some kind of bunny-human hybrid situation. What I'm actually talking about is just a bit more grounded in reality. You see, what happened was, in the early 1900s, an asylum in the town shut down after local residents caused an uproar over the amount of patients housed at the asylum, as well as its close proximity to their homes. The asylum complied with the wishes of the public by shutting its doors and sending its patients to live out the rest of their days elsewhere, more specifically Lorton Prison. On their way out of town, however, the bus carrying the now prisoners swerved and crashed by Fairfax Bridge, and the then patients, now inmates, escaped. All were eventually located except one, a patient named Douglas Griffin. And soon after the crash, police began finding skinned, half-eaten rabbits hung up along the bridge. It is also said that one night a group of young people went out to explore the area and ended up meeting the same fate as the bunnies. Douglas was never found, and in 1970, almost 60 years after the bus crash, many people reported seeing a man in a white suit with bunny ears carrying a very sharp blade. Was it Douglas? A hoax? Or 60 years later, was it some kind of copycat killer?
Next up, we have Quitman, Arkansas. Apparently, y'all got a dog boy you gotta deal with out there. The story begins with a home built in 1890. A few different families lived there before the Bettises moved in. They were a family of three: Floyd and Aileen Bettis and their son Gerald. Gerald was an absolute terror, especially to animals. Stories began to circulate about Gerald roaming the streets, gathering up stray cats and dogs, which he'd then torment to death. And he grew up to treat his own parents just as badly, keeping them locked away in the attic and even throwing his own father down the stairs at one point, killing him instantly. Gerald was arrested and died in jail, but that's not where his ghost is said to be. Families that have moved into the home since have reported strange things happening inside. First of all, it's said that pets just outright refuse to go into this house. Then there's the story of a contractor who came to work on the house and saw a large man with long brown hair carrying a cat by its neck, who then began rushing towards the contractor before vanishing into thin air. Many believe the home to be haunted by Gerald Bettis, aka the Dog Boy.
Next, we are headed on up to Gary, Indiana, also known as a serial killer's playground. Once a thriving steel town known as the Magic City, Gary kind of fell off after the local industry began to decline in the 1990s due to competition overseas. Eventually, it turned into somewhat of a ghost town with over 10,000 abandoned and decaying houses far beyond repair lining its empty streets. As is with most abandoned places, the town quickly became a hotspot for arsonists, vandals, cult gatherings, and even a serial killer by the name of Darren Van. Between 2013 and 2014, Darren ended the lives of 7 different women by forcibly restricting their airways, and 6 of these women he hid throughout various abandoned homes in the town. The bodies remained hidden and his crimes remained undetected until police found his final victim lifeless in a motel bathroom. To avoid the death penalty, Van made a deal. Instead of pleading guilty to the one killing, the only killing police had evidence to charge him for, he would plead guilty to 7 and bring the police to the homes in which the bodies were stashed to prove that he did in fact commit those crimes. He was instead charged with 7 concurrent life sentences without parole.
Next on the list is Ojai, California, and the tale of the Charman. Just south of Ojai lies Camp Comfort County Park, which is full of urban legends and ghost stories, like tons. There's the ghost of a horsewoman, a headless motorcyclist. There's a vampire skeleton confined in a stone coffin. The list just goes on and on. There's stuff happening at this place. But one of the creepiest urban legends is the one they call Charman. So in 1948, there was a huge fire in the home of a father and his son. They were both horribly burnt before firemen arrived, and it took them a while to get there apparently, because by the time they did get there, the father was dead and the son had become completely deranged. He'd hung his father by his feet and skinned him. And the story goes that he just went crazy and then decided to do that. He was like, "Oh, I'm burnt! I gotta hang my father up and eat his skin." I don't know why that was how it goes, but that's apparently how the story goes. He became then this charred, deranged monster and ran off into the woods and started living like Jason Voorhees. He'd come out and attack unsuspecting people. Charman is said to emit a horrible burning smell and only wears bandages over his burnt, peeling skin. Some say he's a ghost. Others say he survived for a while, living on his own in the woods as a deranged psycho, coming out of hiding on occasion to terrorize people.
From the Golden to the Lone Star State, it's time to talk about the Candy Lady who resided in a small Texas town in the early 20th century. While having a Candy Lady in your area might sound like a pretty sweet deal, it really was the complete opposite for those living in this particular town. In fact, the Candy Lady is a story that apparently haunts people of Texas to this day. So who the hell is she? Well, she was a woman with a very sinister NO. It is said that this woman would leave candy on her windowsills each night in an effort to lure young people over to her home. When they got close, she would snatch them up. During this time, many young members of the town were reported missing, and one farmer reported having found rotten teeth strewn along his fields. That is so gross. A sheriff had also been found with his eyes clawed out and his pockets stuffed with candy, and soon after a young boy was found in a very similar state. If this doesn't tell you not to take candy from strangers, I really don't know what does. I can't help you then.
Now we move on to Ellicott City in Maryland. This town has a very unsettling urban legend, that of the Blink Man of Ilchester Tunnel, also known as the Flickergeist. Ilchester Tunnel is said to be haunted by the vengeful spirit of a homeless man who was hit by an oncoming train in the 1900s. Now, if you feel like it, you can summon Blink Man to haunt you rather easily. All you need to do is head to the tunnel at midnight. Of course, it's always midnight, and stare into it for a whole hour. When 1 a.m. hits, it's said that you'll start to see the ghostly, tormented face of the Blink Man, and then every time you blink from that moment on, you'll see him creeping closer and closer to you when your eyes are closed. Now, personally, I wouldn't suggest doing this, even without the possibility of being haunted by a disgruntled homeless ghost the rest of your life. Just don't think it's a great idea to stand staring off into a tunnel in the middle of the night on active train tracks.
Moving on up and over to Exeter, Rhode Island, home to many of history's New England witches, the first of which was executed in 1647. Fast forward to 1982, let's talk about the pure evil that is the final days of a young woman named Mercy Brown. Was she a witch, or was she just educated? Or was she actually a vampire? Well, here's the thing. In her life, Mercy had watched both her mother and sister pass from tuberculosis, the same disease that Mary suffered from leading up to her final day. Due to all the deaths surrounding Mary and the Brown family, the small town of Exeter began to believe that she might have been a witch, or worse still, a vampire. Why? No clue. What did they do about it? Well, after her burial, they dug her up and burned her heart and her liver to ashes, and then they force-fed those ashes to her surviving brother, who died just 2 months later. If that's not dark enough, it is said that Mercy Brown's ghost still haunts the cemetery in which her decimated grave resides.
Next on the list is Tagus, North Dakota. Now, Tagus has long been abandoned. It's a ghost town that once thrived in the 1900s. There's not a whole lot left of it now, just a handful of rundown homes, and of course a stairway to hell. At one time, there was a Lutheran church in the ghost town. It was burnt down in the early 2000s by hoodlums. The abandoned church was always said to be a real spooky place. Satan worshippers were said to practice dark rituals there. It's said if you stand in the exact spot where the church once stood, you can faintly hear screams coming from the souls that were once damned to hell. Other sights to see at the abandoned town of Tagus include, but are not limited to, a ghost train, which some have seen chugging along the old abandoned train tracks. Love the idea of a ghost train. Ghostly hellhounds, regular old ghosts, and ticked off local residents who may not be too pleased with mass amounts of people descending on the ghost town to catch a glimpse of the paranormal.
From the stairway to hell in North Dakota to the gates of hell in Thornton, Colorado. What's next? Highway to hell in AC/DC? Anyways, the gates are said to be located just off of Riverdale Road, a relatively short road in Thornton. But you know what they say, short road, big scary mansion containing the gateway to hell. The mansion is said to have gained its entryway status after a man buried his wife, son, and daughters alive on the property. But these were not the first deaths to occur on the lot. In previous years, many people had been killed and strung up around the mansion as well. We are not sure if the madman responsible for all of these deaths was outright trying to summon the devil, but it appears that when you do that much evil in such a short amount of time, it just kind of happens. Along with the decrepit old mansion's gateway status, the ghost man's wife is said to haunt the property as well, along with a pack of ghost dogs. Many people who have attempted to visit the mansion have reported hearing whispers and screams, experiencing car trouble, feeling a chill, and seeing phantom vehicles and disappearing men on the road. Pretty creepy. I would not recommend going there.
We're rounding out the list with the town of Cumberland. So this small town in Rhode Island has an urban legend that may have been part of the inspiration for Freddy Krueger in A Nightmare on Elm Street. So campers at Camp Currana, couldn't figure out how to pronounce that. All you Camp Currana campers, let me know in the comments. But people at this camp have told stories for decades, apparently going all the way back to the early 20th century. So the tale of Fingernail Freddy. Freddy was a farmer who lived in a small log cabin with his wife and children. He was a quiet man who kept mostly to himself, but little hoodlums were always running around on his land and messing with his crops. Well, one day Freddy he had enough. He decided he was going to scare these menaces off his property once and for all by filling a shotgun with rock salt and firing at them. This did scare them off, but not for good. When Freddy was out in town, the young vandals returned and burned his house down, with Freddy's family still inside. Freddy returned to find his cabin engulfed in flames and tried to rush in to save his loved ones, getting severely burned in the process. So Freddy ran off into the woods, living a secluded life, but every once in a while he'd come out to terrorize young boys at Camp Currana, a disfigured monster with a burnt face and incredibly long nails. Alright, let us know what place we'd want to cover next for like urban legends and that sort of thing.
And what place out of these lists would you go? Which place would you absolutely not go? Yeah, because again, we do read the comments, and feel free to leave any other comments. We will be shouting you guys out in future videos. I've been your host, Hannah Thompson.
James.
See ya.
See ya.